The traveler who at the present day is content to travel in the good old Asiatic style, neither rushed along by a locomotive nor dragged by a stagecoach, who is willing to enjoy hospitalities at far-scattered farmhouses instead of paying his bill at an inn, who is not to be frightened by any amount of loneliness or to be deterred by the roughest roads or the highest hills. Such a traveler in the eastern part of these mountains will find ample food for poetic reflection in the singular scenery of a country which, owing to the ruggedness of the soil and its lying out of the track of all public conveyances, remains almost as unknown to the general tourist as the interior of Bohemia. Little Pescia, 6 May, 99, early morning. From above, Little Pescia looked just the way that village should look at 3 in the morning. Sleepy, peaceful, empty. A dozen multicolored roofs in a semicircle, a grass-covered square, several gliders standing around, the yellow club pavilion by the cliff over the river. The river seemed motionless, very cold and uninviting. Clumps of whitish fog hung over the reeds on the other side. On the club porch, his head thrown back, a man stood watching a glider. His face seemed familiar to Toivo, and there was nothing amazing about that. Toivo knew many emergency squad members, probably every other one. He landed next to the porch and jumped out onto the damp grass. The morning here was cold. The emergency squad man was wearing a huge, comfy jacket with numerous special pockets with nests for all their cylinders, regulators, extinguishers, igniters, and other objects for perfect emergency work. "Hello," said Toivo. "Basil, isn't it?" "Hello, Glumov," the man responded, offering his hand. "That's right, it's Basil. What took you so long?" "What lab work?" Toivo asked. "Well, there are a lot of clues. That disgusting stuff crawled out of that cottage, I guess, and spread in all directions." Basil began pointing. "On the bushes, the grass, and on some of the verandas is dried slime, scales, clumps of something." "What did you see yourself?" "Oh, nothing. When we got here, it was like it is now, except there was fog on the river." "Then there are no witnesses?" "Well, at first we thought everyone had run off. Then we learned that in that house there, the end one on the bank, there's a very elderly woman doing fine, thank you, who never thought about running away." "Really? Why not?" Toivo asked. "No idea," Basil replied, raising his eyebrows and spreading out his hands. "Can you imagine total panic, everyone scattering, the door pulled off the hinges of the Zero cabin, and she doesn't give a damn. We fly in, start up our whole battle campaign, sabers unsheathed, bayonets plunging in, and she comes out on her porch and demands severely that we be more quiet, because we're keeping her up with our noise." "Had there been panic?" Toivo asked. "Oh, yeah, and how?" Basil said, palms outstretched. "There were 18 people here when it all began. 9 ran off on their gliders, 5 escaped through the Zero cabin, and 3 ran off into the woods, got lost. We were lucky to find them. So don't have any doubts about it, there was panic. Yeah, no, there was panic. And there were monsters, and they left traces. Now, why that old lady didn't get scared, that we don't know. She's strange, that old lady. I heard her tell the commander, 'You got here too late, boys. You can't help them now, they're all dead.'" Toivo asked, "What did she have in mind?" "I don't know," Basil said grumpily. "I told you. She's strange." Toivo looked at the toxic pink cottage that contained the old lady. The garden was well tended. There was a glider parked next to the cottage. "I don't recommend disturbing her," Basil said. "Let her wake up on her own, and then you can talk." At that moment, Toivo felt something behind him and turned sharply. A pale face with wide-open, frightened eyes peered out of the club's door. The stranger was silent for a few seconds. Then his bloodless lips moved, and he said in a hoarse voice, "A silly story, isn't it?" Wait, Basil said kindly, moving toward the man with his hands upturned and open. "Please forgive me, you can't come in here. A lot of it is still,
Oh my God, that book is so good.
You told me to read this.
By the way, that's really valuable and hard to find. Hold on to that. That's a nice copy of
I
that.
started to read it last night. This book, I'm like, this may be the greatest science fiction book I've ever.
I know.
But I can't even, I'm like, I don't even, these guys are so
I think there's a contemporary writer who has ripped that off. I'm not going to mention any names.
Really? Well,
I'm not going to say.
And edit it out. Who is it?
I don't.
I really like everything I've read by these guys. I've read 2 or 3 other things. I've read Roads.
Oh, yeah. I think sometimes the translations are
Not great.
Definitely. I know with Lem they're terrible sometimes.
Guys similar. I have a feeling they're both very difficult to translate. But the thing that's really interesting about these guys that I think, and this guy too, that I think is really amazing is that you don't know what the fuck is going on about, like, 50% of the time you don't know what the fuck is supposed to be going on. I mean, you get it, sort of, but it's like, I think I get this. It's just really strange.
Yeah, this one's, I know what you mean. They're almost not talking about what's happening.
No,
it's always, you don't even until the very end, you have a glimpse of what's going on in that.
Yeah, you get
I know exactly what you mean. That's the ultimate one of that.
And they don't explain a lot of things, and you're like, wait a minute, what the fuck is this they're talking about?
I recently read When Monday Begins Saturday. Go ahead.
I've never read that. Is that good?
I liked it. It was sort of comical, this one.
Yeah.
It was
I've never read that one. But I hear that's people.
it wasn't my favorite by them. It was almost like it was too comical, satirical.
Yeah.
And I can't tell if the translation kind of I was disappointed.
Same thing. And it's like, I've heard that this guy, the translations are like meaningless, basically.
Yeah, I was in Poland. I asked, these guys were like, oh, you don't read any Polish, you don't know shit about literature. And I said, I read Lem. And they were like, and then they all just laughed for about 5 minutes. They're like, you can't read Lem in anything but Polish, you fool. I have no idea why, but I think, they said all these puns, and he writes in Old Polish and in, I don't know. We have no idea what's going on in those books.
You're the one who told me this then. You're the one who said to me, it's really, really like English. It's like really dense and like puns, and everything's a pun. And like you can't really...
But Siberia, how great is that? Those are so fun in the translation anyway.
Those Perks, the pilot.
Yeah, those ones. Siberia, Perks the Pilot, Return from the Stars. Those are all great translations.
Did you read that one, Fiasco? Have you ever read that one?
I haven't read that, but I've heard that's very top.
And that's one where I'm like, I'm not entirely sure I know what the fuck is going on in this. And it's like, and that's kind of the point with that book. You're sort of like, I think part of the point is that I'm really not supposed to know what the fuck exactly.
Well, look at their famous roadside picnic. I mean, that's the Strugatsky's.
No,
but that whole thing, the whole story about, you never really know what happened. You just know that these aliens came, maybe it left something, and you don't know what it was. Or it's just sort of goes.
I read this one called like The Snail on the Slope, which is like kind of like that one, and it's like, oh, what the fuck was going on? And I wonder if they're 2 guys who grew up under Soviet. Gotta have a lot to do with it.
I've read this one, Noon 22nd Century, which is my favorite by them, I think. It's just, that's really positive about communism. It's like, the only time I've read like, oh, the great sci-fi future of a communist world where we've unified the America, everyone's like got a job, and it's so cool.
This one kind of seems like it is.
That might be in the same world as Noon 20th.
This one seems to be.
That's right. It's an institute in that kind of a communist world. I love that vibe.
But I can't exactly tell if it is or not. That's what's really weird. I'm like, is this like what? I can't quite tell. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's like this. It's almost like a secret service. But you're like, what are they? And they don't even understand what they're studying. It's like they're studying a phenomenon that might not even exist. And they can't be. Oh, sorry.
Don't tell me too much more. But it's like, but yes, that is what this one is. It's like there's this weird bureau that studies these unexplained. Yeah. But you can't tell whether they believe it or not.
It's a story of whether they do or not. Yeah.
But that's what's cool about it. That's funny, the thing you told me about the Polish thing, because that reminds me when I worked in Russia. I shot this movie in Russia, and I worked with this amazing Russian actress named Dina Korzun. And she, at one point, I had just read this guy, Andrei Platonov. Have you read any of that stuff? You'd actually really like them. He he was a Soviet era guy, and it's very much this weird thing of like rah Soviet Union, but not really. But they're really weird, and they're not science fiction, but they feel like they are. He writes one about a guy who's like a scientist who goes out to the desert to deal with this tribe. He has to go to like some far-flung Soviet satellite that's like out in the Gobi Desert and deal with this tribe that doesn't understand. It's really weird. But at the time I said to her, she was like, "You read Russian literature?" And I was like, "I do." I said, "I've read Platonov." And she was like, "You read him in Russian?" I've read. She was like, "You've not read it." And I was like, "Yeah, no, they did these new translations." And she was like, "You have not read it." And I was like, "No, I did." She was like, "No, I am saying to you, you have not read it. It is not possible to read him." She got angry at me. We were in this restaurant. And she was like, "It's impossible for you to have read it." She was like, "In Russian, it's impossible to read. Impossible to read in Russian." She was like, and she got so angry at me. And these do seem like they're not good.
So jealous.
Hell, they're not. You can kind of tell they're not good translations.
Oh, well, that one, I mean, I love that one. I don't know. Yeah, they're all, that's from the 80s, early 80s or something. But the later books by them are much darker. They really started, as scientists. Well, I think one was a scientist and the other was like a linguist or journalist, maybe. Japanese expert.
Right.
And so I think they got much more cynical about the Soviet Union. The later books are much darker and bitter.
Yeah, I read this one about, it was called like the City of Doom or the Doomed City or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
I think I read that one too.
Had the building that keeps moving in it, that they can't find this one building because it keeps moving. And it keeps the same guy, like the reality keeps changing, but the guy doesn't know it. And it's the same guy and he's in different reality, I think. And it's like a whole thing with these baboons attack the city, but like all this random shit.
Jesus. Lem wrote fan letters to Philip K. Dick, and Dick sent them to the FBI. It was like, this communist is trying to like convert me, trying to subvert us.
So sad.
Jesus.
No, it's such a bummer though, that it's like.
Lem was like, American science fiction is trash, except for one writer.
Have you ever seen him like speaking? Have you ever seen Lem?
No, I haven't. I've heard some funny stories.
He's like some weird.
Really? Yeah.
He's like an elf or something. He's got this incredible face.
They asked him, "What do you think of Tarkovsky's version of Solaris, your novel?" And he had a book on his table and he threw it at the guy's head and said, "Never mention the name of that enemy of science in my house again."
But he was kind of an enemy of science, Lem, isn't he? That's why you got to read.
He had the only Mercedes in Krakow, supposedly. And it was like totally fucked up one, but he's just very proud of it.
But that's why you should read Fiasco, because that book is like, seems pretty anti-science to me. It doesn't.
Oh, yeah. No, I believe that, yeah.
It seems very anti-science.
I mean, the ones of the Siberia is just robots building new robots. It's just science without any humanity, just taking the point of ridiculousness.
Definitely.
I mean, they have humans in there, I think, as like pets.
Well, there's just the arrogance of like science that they think they can actually figure out.
Yeah, I mean, in Solaris too. I mean, that's such a good one.
Yeah, that is great.
So beautiful. I mean, again, that's all. I mean, all of these are about, to be too philosophical about it. They're all about, we know nothing.
And that's interesting though, because Americans don't write that.
You're right. That's not a theme of American science fiction very often.
Like Sturgeon was really into these guys, wasn't he?
That's right. He wrote the preface to Noon 22nd Century.
But it's like they're very, very like naturalistic. They're very kind of gritty and like everything's kind of like.
That's right. They have that sense of like a Moscow or Leningrad street at the same time.
Making a sandwich and stuff like that, and then like insane, like dilapidated, shitty spaceship that's just like, it's got all that kind of stuff that's really great. I like that about it, which seems really kind of Russian. It's everything's just super fucking depressing, and everybody's just like drinking their shitty synthetic vodka and stuff like that. Yeah, this is interesting because I want to. Have I ever told you about that stuff I found out about and was reading some of it a while ago? This cosmism stuff. This cosmism thing. This Russian cosmism.
Not Moo.
No. Okay. That's a British guy. That's like Atlantis and stuff like that. That's like no. It was this whole like philosophical religious movement in Russia, I think kind of before the Soviet Union, and then even during the Soviet Union, and it had a lot to do with sort of the early rocketry and stuff like that. And it's this really weird combination of like science and religion, and it's this whole kind of like super crazy mystical school of like thought that's all about space exploration and religious exploration and union.
Was this the time of Tsiolkovsky?
Yes. Yeah. He was kind of one of these guys.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a bunch of these other guys, and some of them were like full-on kind of weird mystical monk type guys, and some of them were scientists, but they had these whole crazy, one guy had this whole thing about technology was going to allow us to resurrect the dead. It's this idea of resurrecting the dead on...
I think Tsiolkovsky believed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Maybe they're right. They're not wrong. Who knows what's going to happen in the end?
Some of them got into this very kind of ecological stuff too. That's very ahead of its time, and this whole sort of like the earth is this living organism. The cosmism, Russian cosmism.
Oh, yeah.
Really, it's really cool because it's so Russian. It's like light years ahead in space and like weirdly stuck in the Middle Ages.
To ComCon 2, Sector Urals North to Maxim Camera, personal and official, date 3 June 94, from I. Bromberg, Senior Consultant, ComCon 1, Doctor of Historical Sciences. The concept of home will extend to universal scope, sir. This is probably why that irresponsible and superficial concept of the Wanderers appeared in the first place. A new metabolism develops, and as a result, life and health become practically eternal. The age of an individual becomes comparable with the age of cosmic objects, with a total absence of psychic weariness. An individual of the monocosm does not need creators. He is his own creator and consumer of culture. From a drop of water, not only can he recreate the image of the ocean, but the whole world of the creatures that inhabit it, including the reasoning ones, and all this with a constant, unsatisfiable sense of hunger. Every new individual appears as a creation of syntactic art. He is created by physiologists, geneticists, engineers, psychologists, teachers, and philosophers of monocosm. This process will definitely take up to several Earth decades, and naturally is the most engrossing and respected sort of activity of the Wanderers. Contemporary humanity does not know of any analog for this kind of art, if one does not count the very rare instances of great love. Create without destroying. That is the motto of the monocosm. The monocosm cannot consider its path of development and its modus vivendi to be the only true path. Pain and despair elicit pictures of separated minds that had not matured to become part of it. It must wait until reason within the framework of evolution of the first order develops to the state of an all-planet socium. For it is only after that you can interfere with biostructure, with the aim of preparing the bearer of intelligence to the transformation into the monocosmic organism of a wanderer. For the intervention of the wanderers into the fates of separated civilizations can yield nothing worthwhile. A significant situation. The progressors of Earth strive to speed up the historical process of creating more developed social structures in suffering civilizations. Thereby, they are preparing new reserves for material for the future work of monocosm.